This week, we continue our journey through Manly P. Hall's The Initiates of the Flame. Diving into Chapter 2, we're looking for a sacred city, Shambhala. But is it a real place, or is it somewhere much closer to us? Stay tuned to learn the rest.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 643. My thanks goes out to those contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners of the WCY podcast. Without you, we can't continue to make this program what it is. If you're curious on how you can help support the WCY podcast, head on over to WCYpodcast.com, click on support the show, and check out your options. So, what's going on in the presentations? Well, we've got the next event was going to be August 9th, 10th, 11th, which will be at Camp Cornerstone. The main event, I believe, is going to be just on the 10th. The other days are ends of the trip and or little extras that are happening as people set up for camp or tear down, that kind of thing. All the information for Camp Cornerstone can be found on our website, WCY Podcast, as in Whence Came You, podcast.com. Click on presentation schedule and just scroll down a little bit. You'll see 3 main images there. All 3 of them, clicking on them will allow you to go to the website where you can get registered. Table Lodge is where I will be speaking, and that'll be on Saturday evening. Some of you have contacted me and said that you're really enjoying this reading that we're doing currently, and so let's not belabor it any longer. Let's get right into The Initiates of the Flame by Manly P. Hall, Chapter 2, The Sacred City of Shambhala. In every mythology and legendary religion of the world, there is one spot that is sacred above all others to the great ideal of that religion. To the Norsemen, it was Valhalla, the city of the slain, built of the spears of heroes, where feasting and warfare was the order of the day. Here the heroes fought all day and revered by night. Every day they killed the wild boar and feasted on it, and the next day it came to life again. In the Northland, they tell that Valhalla was high on the top of the mountains, and that it was connected to the earth below by Bifrost or Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, that up and down this bridge the gods came, and Odin and Allfather came down from Asgard, the city of the gods, and worked and labored with mankind. Amongst the Greeks, Mount Olympus was held sacred, and here the gods are said to have lived high on the top of a mountain. The Knights of the Grail are said to have had their castle among the crags and peaks of the northern Spain on Mount Salvart. In every religion of the world there is a sacred spot, Meru of the Oriental, and Mount Moriah and Mount Sinai, upon which the tablets of law were given to man. All those are symbols of one universal ideal, and as each of these religions claimed amongst the clouds a castle and a home, so it is said that all the religions of the world have their headquarters in Shambhala, the sacred city in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia. Among the Asian nations, there are wonderful legends of this sacred city, where it is said the Great White Lodge or Brotherhood meets to carry on the governing of world affairs. As the Osirs of Scandinavia were 12 in number, as Olympus had 12 gods, so the Great White Brotherhood is said to have 12 members which meet in Shambhala and direct the affairs of men. It is said that this center of universal religion descended upon the earth when the polar cap, which was the first part of the earth to crystallize, became solid enough to support life. Science now knows that not only does the earth have 2 motions, that of rotation upon its axis and revolution around the sun, but that it has 9 other motions, according to Flammarion, a French astronomer. One of these motions is that of the alternation of the poles. In other words, someday that part of the Earth's surface which is now the North Pole will become the South Pole. Therefore, it is said that the sacred city has left its central position, and, after much wandering, is now located in Mongolia. Those who are acquainted with Muslim religion will see something of great interest in the pilgrimage to Kaaba at Mecca. where thousands go each year to give honor to the Stone of Abraham, the great aerolite, upon which Muhammad is said to have rested his foot. Old and young alike, some even carried wind through desert sands and endured untold hardships, many coming from great distances to visit the place they cherish and love. In India, we find the same thing. There are many sacred places to which pilgrims go, even as the Templars went in our Christian religion to the sepulchre of Christ. Few see in this anything more than the outward symbol, but the true student recognizes the great esoteric truth contained therein. The spiritual consciousness in man is a pilgrimage on the way to Mecca. As this consciousness passes upward through the centers of the nerves and the body, it is like the pilgrim climbing the heights of Sinai, or the knight of the Grail returning to Mount Salvart. When the spinal fire of man starts upward in its wanderings, it stops at many shrines and visits many holy places. For the like Masonic brother and his Jacob's ladder, the way that leads to heaven is upward and inward. The spinal fire goes through the centers or the seed ground of many great principles and worships at the shrine of many divine essences within itself. But it is certainly going upward, and finally it reaches the great desert. Only after pain and suffering and long labor does it cross that waste of sand. This is the Gethsemane of the higher man. But finally he crosses the sacred desert, and before him, in the heart of the lotus, rises the golden city, Shambhala. On the previous page, an illustration of a lotus, with the description, "May your consciousness be lifted upward through the tree of life within yourself, until in the brain it blossoms forth as the lotus, that rising from the darkness of the lower world lifts its flower to catch the rays of the sun." The depiction is that of a elongated pole or tree with the lotus at the top and a winding snake around it, with roots extending about 1/8 of its total length. Moving on, there is an image of the frontal sinus, just above the nose and eyes. In the spreading of the bone between the eyes, called the frontal sinus, is the great seat of the divine man. There, in a peculiar gaseous material, floats, or rather exists, or is, the fine essence which we know as the spirit. This is the lost city in the sacred desert, connected to the lower world by the rainbow bridge or the silver cord, and it is to this point in himself that the student is striving to rise. This is the sacred pilgrimage of the soul, in which the individual leaves the lower man and the world below and climbs upward into the higher man or higher world, the brain. This is the great pilgrimage to Shambhala, and as the great city is the center for the direction of our earth, so the corresponding great city in man is the center for his governmental system. When any other thing governs man, he is not attuned to his own higher self, and it is only when the gods representing the higher principle come down the rainbow bridge and labor with him, teaching him the arts and sciences, that he is truly receiving his divine birthright. In the Orient, the student looks forward with eager longing to the time when he shall be allowed to worship before the gates of the sacred city, when he also shall see the initiates in silent conclave around the circular table of the zodiac, when the veil of Isis shall be torn away and the cover lifted from the Grail cup. On the previous page we find the rod that budded, a simple rod with buds of flowers coming off of it, like roses. An inscription reads, "The buds in the rod are the 7 centers within yourself, which, when you develop their spiritual powers, shine out as centers of fire within your own being." The ancients have taken flowers to symbolize these centers, which, when they shine out, show that the dead stick, cut from the tree of life, has budded. Continuing on, let the student remember that all of these things must first happen within himself before he can find them in the universe without. The 12 elder brothers within himself must first be reached and understood before those of the universe can be comprehended. If he would find the great initiates without, he must first find them within. And if he would see that sacred city in the Lotus Blossom, he must first open that lotus within himself, which he does, petal by petal, when he purifies and attunes himself to the higher principles within. The lotus is the spinal column once more, its roots deep in materiality, its blossom the brain, and only when he sends upward nourishment and power can the lotus blossom within himself blossom forth with its many petals, giving out their spiritual fragrance. Sometimes you will see in store windows Asian gods or Buddhas sitting on the blossom of a lotus. In fact, if you look carefully, you will find that nearly all of the Asian gods are so depicted. This means that they have opened within themselves that spiritual consciousness which they call the Shuma. You have seen the hats worn by Hindu gods. They are made to represent a flower upside down. And once more, like the rod of Aaron that budded, we see the reference made to the unfolding of consciousness within. When the lotus blossom has reached maturity, it drops its seed, and from this seed new plants are produced. It is this same within the spiritual consciousness which, when the plant is finished and its work is done, is released to work and produce other things. In the Western world, the lotus has been changed to the rose. The roses of the Rosicrucian, the roses of the Masonic degrees, and also those of the Order of the Garter in England all stand for the same thing, the awakening of consciousness and the unfolding into the full bloom of the soul qualities of man. When man awakens and opens this bud within himself, he finds, like the gold pollen in a flower, this wonderful spiritual city, Shambhala, in the heart of the lotus. When this pilgrimage of his spiritual fire is accomplished, he is liberated from the top of the mountain, as in the ascension of Christ, and the spiritual man, freed by his pilgrimage from the wheel of bondage, rises upward from among his disciples the convolutions of the brain with a great cry of the initiate, which has sounded through the mystery schools for ages. When the purified student goes onward and upward to become a pillar in the temple of his God, with that last cry, the true mystery of Shambhala, the sacred city, is understood, and he joins the ranks of those who, in white robes of purity, their own soul bodies, gaze down upon the world and see others liberated in the same way, and who also sound the eternal tocsin, or consummatum est, it is finished. The chapter then has again the image of the lotus, and the following page, an image of the Philosopher's Stone. One might imagine a similar icon as in the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction's camp. An illustration of this will of course be shown, but it is labeled the Philosopher's Stone with this inscription: "This is the true stone of the philosopher, which gives him power over all created things. This stone is himself. The experiences of his evolution have cut and polished the rough stone until, in the initiate, it reflects the light of creation from 1,000 different facets." That's it for this chapter. Chapter 2, the sacred city of Shambhala, something described as something that resides within all of us. If you've been listening to the show any number of times, then you know there's this reoccurring theme of the divinity within man, that somehow God would hide the best of things where man would least look for them. And yet here we are again with Manly P. Hall bringing this truth to us, this sort of his idea of a universal idea to help us grasp these things. Now, some of what you've heard here sounds very similar to what we've read in things like The Occult Anatomy of Man when we read that. Now, considering that text was all about the hidden anatomy of man, certainly here we've seen that reoccurring theme. Let me know your thoughts on this particular chapter, and I hope you enjoyed. So one more time, I want to thank our producers, fellows, contributors, and legacy partners. If you're curious on how to support the show, head on over to our website, check out the various options there, and hey, the easiest way to help out is just share the show with your friends. Share links to our YouTube videos on social media, wherever you like. Trusted Masonic education for anyone interested in the royal art. That's it for this week. We'll talk to you all next week, and until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WCY Media.
This is